The janitor moved through the marble corridors of the government building like a ghost. The fluorescent lights glinted off the polished floors as she pushed her mop back and forth with practiced precision. To anyone walking past, she was nothing more than background noise, a soft whoosh of movement, a shadow among the beige walls and glass partitions. No one paused to ask her name or notice the calm confidence in her stride. Most employees had long forgotten she even existed, except when she silently corrected a spilled coffee or an errant paper. But appearances were deceiving. Behind her unassuming uniform and quiet demeanor was a woman whose life had been carved out of extreme discipline and danger. She had served 12 years in the Navy SEALs, enduring training so grueling it had broken some of the toughest men she knew. She had survived operations that would have made headlines if the details weren't classified. And now, in this ordinary government building, she carried a secret that could command the attention of the most powerful officials in the country. A code, a single sequence of letters and numbers, the utterance of which demanded immediate obedience. As she swiped the mop across the floor, she noticed the subtle tension in the air. It was faint at first, a hum beneath the ordinary office noises, footsteps too hurried, voices a little too sharp. She paused, tilting her head. Something wasn't right. The instinct, honed over years of life-or-death situations, prickled at the base of her neck. Just a mop, just a uniform, she whispered to herself, a mantra to keep her calm. But she didn't slow her movement. If anything, she moved with more precision, more awareness, mapping the hallways like a battlefield she knew intimately. In the main lobby, a group of employees clustered near the elevators, murmuring anxiously. The janitor noticed the subtle signs that something unusual was unfolding. Security guards moving in short, urgent bursts, the faint glow of emergency lights flickering across the ceiling, and the hum of an electronic device that no ordinary worker would recognize. Her eyes narrowed. She crouched briefly to adjust the mop bucket and saw a man in a dark suit whispering urgently into a headset, his face pale, hands trembling. "We've got a problem. It's moving faster than we anticipated," he said. The janitor's fingers brushed the small card in her pocket that contained the SEAL command code. It was a tiny card, easy to miss, but it represented something far greater than herself. One word, one sequence, and she could take control of the room without a single person daring to question her authority. The hum of anxiety grew louder. Her mind raced through protocols she hadn't used in years, recalling every lesson from missions that never made it into the news. Assess, contain, neutralize, protect. Those were the steps drilled into her from day one, and she was ready. A sudden crash echoed from down the hallway, metal against concrete. Papers fluttered like startled birds. People screamed. Most employees froze in shock. Some ran blindly. Others clutched phones, dialing numbers they barely understood. But she moved forward with intention, every step deliberate. Through the chaos, she caught a glimpse of a young security officer stumbling toward the main corridor, eyes wide in terror. His radio squawked, voice breaking. "It's in the wrong hands. We can't." The janitor's pulse quickened. She knew what he meant even before he finished. She could see it in the direction of his gaze. Someone had entered the building without clearance. Someone with lethal intent. She stopped mid-step, crouching slightly behind a marble pillar, eyes scanning the scene. Her body was tense but controlled, her breathing steady. She remembered every drill she had memorized. How to move without drawing attention. How to remain unseen yet hyper-aware, how to control a situation with the mere suggestion of authority. The security officer's words were cut off abruptly as he ducked behind a nearby corner. She assessed the distance between herself and the threat, 20 feet, maybe 30. There was no time for hesitation. Her fingers brushed the edge of the small SEAL card again. She whispered the code under her breath, just enough so that it would reach the ears of those trained to recognize it. It was a sound so subtle, almost imperceptible, yet it carried weight. Immediately, the effect began to manifest. Employees froze mid-motion, some gripping papers that fluttered in their hands, others mid-step with coffee cups trembling. The panic in their eyes clashed with the sudden, inexplicable compulsion to obey an unseen command. The janitor, once invisible, became the focal point of the room's attention, though she barely moved. She remained calm, composed, almost eerily so. No one in the hall realized what had just happened. They only felt it, the sudden, unnatural stillness, the collective draw of their focus toward her. She stepped out from behind the pillar, mop in hand, walking slowly toward the source of the chaos, each movement deliberate, radiating authority without a word. Through the thick tension, she noticed the shadow of a figure moving in the corridor, slender, quick, careful. Not a regular employee, not a guard, someone else entirely, someone dangerous. Her training had taught her to recognize intent, to feel the difference between casual movement and lethal purpose. The figure paused, sensing her presence, turning slightly, and the two locked eyes across the hall. She knew in an instant that this intruder was armed, trained, and ready to escalate. The calm authority she radiated was the only thing standing between chaos and catastrophe. Her heart rate accelerated, though her face betrayed nothing. Every SEAL drill, every tactical maneuver, every instinct honed over more than a decade screamed at her that this could be the moment that defined the day. She couldn't fail. And then came the faintest hint of a metallic glint in the intruder's hand. The janitor's mind raced through contingency plans. Disarm, contain, neutralize. Simple, clean, efficient, lethal if necessary. She had walked into impossible scenarios before and emerged intact, and today would be no different. She took a deliberate step forward, mop raised just enough to seem casual, and whispered under her breath, "Time to see what you're made of." The shadow shifted. A hand twitched near the weapon. The janitor tightened her grip on the mop, her every muscle ready to spring. The room seemed to shrink around her, the hum of fear thickening like smoke. Every official, every employee, every overlooked soul now depended on her. And then the shadow began moving faster, edging closer to her, unaware that the invisible janitor was more dangerous than anyone expected. Her pulse surged. Her training told her to act, but she waited, calculating, analyzing, poised like a predator. In the next moments, she would either neutralize the threat or face a challenge that could cost more than just her pride. The story of a janitor, invisible for so long, was about to be rewritten. And nobody in that building, not the officials, not the guards, not even the terrified employees, had any idea what was coming. The air crackled with tension. A single breath, a single misstep could ignite disaster. And as the shadow moved closer, the janitor whispered again, barely audible, "This ends now." The hallway fell into a tense stillness, the calm before the storm. The shadow moved with careful precision, weaving through the corridors as though it owned the building. To anyone else, it would have been just another person hurrying through the hallways, but the janitor, no, the former Navy SEAL, sensed its intent instantly. She could read posture, breathing, and micro-movements the way ordinary people read a newspaper. Every calculated step, every subtle shift of weight, screamed danger. She crouched slightly behind a polished marble column, her mop at the ready, not for cleaning but as a prop for leverage, distraction, and if necessary, defense. She breathed quietly, listening. The faint sound of footsteps echoed through the hall, deliberate and controlled. Not panic, not hesitation. Precision. Her training kicked in fully. Years of grueling drills and missions in hostile territory surged through her veins, sharpening her senses. The intruder moved with deadly intent, and the officials scattered across the building were utterly unprepared. If she didn't act now, they wouldn't stand a chance. "Control the situation. Control the room," she whispered under her breath, repeating another SEAL mantra. Her eyes scanned the hall, emergency lights flickered, casting long, distorted shadows that danced across the walls. The employees who had frozen in the earlier command code now looked to her instinctively. Their eyes, wide with fear and confusion, begged for direction. and she provided it not with words but with presence. The intruder paused, crouched slightly as though assessing his environment. The janitor moved with silent speed, slipping along the shadows of the hall, keeping herself just out of his direct line of sight. She noted the glint of something metallic in his hand. Not a gun, but possibly a tool designed to hack, destroy, or intimidate. Something the security team had never imagined. "Not today," she muttered. She glanced at the employees, still frozen, still silent under her command. For a brief moment, she allowed herself a flicker of satisfaction. Years of being overlooked had taught her the art of invisibility, and now, that invisibility had transformed into authority. People who had never noticed her were now waiting for her guidance, entirely dependent on her instincts. She took a step forward, careful not to alert the intruder, her eyes locking on the device in his hand. Then she noticed movement behind him, a younger employee, probably one who had broken the freeze instinct and was now moving nervously. A potential hostage. Her pulse quickened. The scenario had escalated. The stakes were real. The intruder could react at any moment and this person could be caught in the crossfire. She needed a plan and she needed it now. The janitor reached into her pocket, feeling the familiar card, the SEAL command code. It was her ace, her guarantee that she could regain control if the situation deteriorated. But she hesitated. Using it again too soon might draw attention from people who didn't understand the nuances of the code, creating more confusion. Yet, in the back of her mind, she knew that hesitation could cost lives. The intruder raised the device slightly, testing something, and that split-second decision told her everything she needed to know. It wasn't just a tool, it was a weapon, and she had only moments before it became active. She sprinted lightly along the side of the hall, mop in hand, positioning herself between the intruder and the nearest group of employees. Every movement precise, every step calculated. Her heart pounded, but her breathing remained controlled. The employees, though frozen by her earlier command, seemed to sense the shift in the air, their eyes following her instinctively. "Stop, now," she whispered sharply, though not to the intruder. She was too far away to be heard, but she needed to create a visual presence to make herself the center of attention, a distraction. The intruder looked up, sensing the subtle motion, and his head snapped in her direction. Their eyes met, and in that moment she assessed him completely. Mid-30s, trained, disciplined, focused, and completely unaware of how much she knew about him already. He moved with stealth, yet her awareness had already mapped his every potential reaction. She noticed the way he gripped the device, the tension in his fingers, the slight quiver that betrayed impatience or perhaps uncertainty, a small opening. "Time to act," she whispered. Her mop swung in a practiced arc, more than just a cleaning tool now, an extension of her body, a weapon she could use for leverage, control, or distraction. She lunged, not recklessly, but with the precision of someone who had survived situations that made bullets look slow. The intruder reacted instantly, and for a heartbeat they were locked in a silent, deadly ballet. He adjusted his grip on the device, ready to move, to strike, to escape. She mirrored his motion, anticipating his intent. Then a noise from the side, a dropped phone, a startled gasp made him twitch. That tiny misstep was all she needed. Her training told her, exploit hesitation, control momentum, neutralize threats efficiently. She surged forward, intercepting the intruder's motion, using her mop to redirect the device slightly away from the young employee. Sparks flew as metal scraped against concrete, a harsh, grating noise that echoed down the hallway. The intruder stumbled, momentarily off balance, and she took a step closer, using body leverage to pin him against the wall. His eyes widened, shocked at the sudden dominance of someone in an ordinary janitor's uniform. He had assumed he could move unseen, strike unseen, and no one would oppose him. He was wrong. Her voice, calm but commanding, cut through the tension. "Step away from the device, now." He hesitated, assessing the situation, Realizing that the frozen employees, the subtle authority, and her precise movements were not random, the janitor wasn't just anyone cleaning floors. She was a predator disguised as ordinary, a strategist disguised as invisible, a SEAL disguised as a janitor. She edged closer, keeping her eyes locked on the device in his hands, every muscle ready to spring. The seconds stretched into what felt like minutes, but in reality, only a heartbeat had passed. Then a faint sound, the unmistakable ticking of a timer, made her heart skip. The device was active. The stakes had escalated beyond neutralizing a threat. Now it was a race against time. The intruder's eyes flicked to her and back to the device, panic beginning to flicker where confidence had once resided. She had created a psychological advantage, not with force alone, but with presence, precision, and authority. Her mind worked frantically, calculating every possible move. Disarm, redirect, neutralize, contain. One mistake, one misstep, and it could all end in disaster. She whispered under her breath, more to herself than anyone else. Every second counts. With a sudden, lightning-quick motion, she lunged forward, using the mop to tap the device away from the employee. Sparks flew. Metal clanged. The intruder struggled to maintain control, but she anticipated every movement. In a flash, she was beside him, hands working to secure the device, body positioning to prevent any further danger. The employees, still frozen under her earlier command, watched in awe as the janitor revealed a side of herself they never knew existed. And just as the device began to spark dangerously, she realized something critical, a secondary trigger, hidden, silent, and deadly. One wrong move could ignite it. Her breath hitched slightly, pulse pounding, but her expression remained calm, resolute, unshakable. Years of life-or-death training had prepared her for this exact moment. The intruder, now fully aware of his miscalculation, froze, eyes wide with disbelief. The janitor, quiet and unassuming no longer, had not only intercepted him but now held complete control. But the moment of triumph was fleeting. Behind him, another shadow flickered, an accomplice perhaps watching, waiting, ready to strike. And in that instant, the janitor knew the battle was far from over. The hallway, once ordinary and mundane, had transformed into a theater of tension, danger, and suspense. And all eyes, though none dared to move, were locked on her, the invisible hero, the janitor who was about to reveal the full extent of her lethal capability. The seconds stretched, the air thick with anticipation. One wrong move and it would all unravel. One right move and she could control the chaos entirely. She adjusted her stance, whispering under her breath again, "Stay calm, stay sharp, one step at a time." And as the second shadow edged closer, the story teetered on the edge of disaster and revelation, leaving everyone, including herself, in suspended anticipation. The hallway seemed to shrink, compressing the fear and tension into a single taut wire. Every footstep, every breath, every subtle motion carried weight. The janitor, her uniform ordinary, her mop forgotten at her side, was the center of an invisible storm. Around her, employees remained frozen, trapped under the authority she exuded. Every eye followed her, every thought instinctively deferred to her judgment, though none of them knew why. The intruder, realizing he had underestimated her, shifted his stance. He had expected to find a building of distracted office workers, some security guards, and perhaps one or two vigilant eyes. Instead, he found someone who had the calculated calm of a battlefield commander. A janitor. But not just any janitor. A woman whose very presence could control a room, disarm a threat, and survive in situations that would terrify trained operatives. He made a subtle move toward the device in his hands, testing her reaction. She didn't flinch. Instead, she took a step forward, careful, measured, each motion deliberate. Her eyes locked on his, scanning, analyzing, predicting. She wasn't just reacting. She was controlling, anticipating, owning every inch of the space. The employees, still frozen, felt an odd mixture of fear and awe. Something primal in them recognized authority, even without words. Their attention sharpened, their postures straightened, and yet they were completely unaware of why they obeyed, their minds subconsciously responding to the seal code she had uttered. The intruder's confidence faltered. He had trained for confrontation, for danger, for conflict, but nothing had prepared him for this. For a silent adversary who commanded obedience not with threats, not with force, but with presence. He began calculating the odds. The hall was narrow. The janitor had perfect cover. She controlled every angle. One wrong move and he could be trapped. A faint beep from the device drew her attention. A timer. Seconds now counting down, bright red digits blinking threateningly. She didn't panic. Her mind, honed by years of life-or-death missions, raced through possibilities. Disarm, neutralize, contain. Every option weighed carefully against the ticking threat. The intruder lunged suddenly, a desperate move to regain control. She sidestepped with the grace of a predator, pushing him just enough to disturb his balance, her mop serving as both shield and tool. Sparks flew as the device scraped against the marble floor. The sound was sharp, ringing through the silent room like a gunshot. He stumbled, caught off guard, eyes widening as he realized that the ordinary janitor was far from ordinary. His training told him to fight, to resist, to regain control, but instinct told him he was already too late. She had dominated the space, dominated the psychological battle, and now dominated the physical confrontation. Her hands moved with precise efficiency, working to secure the device while keeping the intruder off balance. Every movement calculated, every motion economical. She had faced explosions, ambushes, hostile territory, and the chaos of war, yet this confined hall felt no less intense. Her heart rate climbed, but her mind remained razor-sharp. The intruder cursed under his breath, realizing he had underestimated her completely. He tried to reach for a secondary weapon hidden at his side, but she anticipated it, stepping forward, positioning herself perfectly to block him. A simple tilt of her body redirected his momentum. He struggled, trying to regain advantage, but it was futile. Every action he attempted had already been countered, predicted, neutralized. The employees, watching from a distance, were caught in awe and terror. Their mundane perception of reality, the janitor as invisible, ordinary, overlooked, was shattered in moments. The calm, collected woman in the green uniform had become an agent of controlled chaos, a figure of absolute authority and precision. Their minds struggled to reconcile the image of a mop-wielding cleaner with the lethal efficiency she displayed. The device beeped again, closer now to activation. The timer read 10 seconds. 10 seconds to disaster or 10 seconds to control. She crouched slightly, assessing the wiring with trained eyes. Her fingers hovered near the device, ready to act, yet every motion had to be flawless. One misstep could trigger an irreversible outcome. The intruder's face betrayed panic now. Sweat glistened on his forehead, his confidence evaporating. He had thought he could manipulate, intimidate, or even escape. But she had already cornered him mentally, physically, and psychologically. He could see it in her calm, unwavering gaze. There was no room for bluff, for hesitation, for escape. A sudden sound from behind him, a click, almost imperceptible, signaled the presence of a potential secondary trigger. He tensed. She tensed. Time contracted into a narrow line. Every second held the potential for catastrophe. She acted first. With a lightning-quick motion, her hand secured the device, twisting, redirecting, stabilizing. Sparks flew, and the metallic clatter reverberated down the hallway. The intruder tried to wrest control, but her grip was absolute. Her training had made her anticipate every possible contingency, and she executed flawlessly. The hall seemed to hold its breath. Employees remained frozen, utterly captivated, as the janitor wrestled with a device that could have ended everything in seconds. The intruder, now thoroughly outmatched, struggled, cursed, and spat words of frustration, but she ignored them. Words had no power here. Only precision, authority, and timing mattered. Finally, with a deft maneuver, she neutralized the device, twisting wires, adjusting circuits, and deactivating its lethal potential. A final spark, a hiss of relief, and the timer stopped. 10 seconds remained, but the threat had been contained. The intruder collapsed against the wall, eyes wide, realization dawning. He had been outplayed by someone he dismissed as nothing. And yet the janitor didn't celebrate. She remained calm, scanning for any secondary threats, any additional dangers. The hallway was still tense, still charged with potential violence. She could not relax, not yet. The employees slowly began to exhale, still under the lingering effect of the SEAL command. Their posture straightened, their eyes focused, but confusion mingled with awe. Some whispered, but none dared approach. She was no longer invisible. She had become a figure of legend in their eyes, and yet she remained human, composed, and seemingly ordinary in appearance. Her mind was already moving ahead. Who else might be involved? Was the intruder alone? Could there be another device? Every instinct screamed caution. She had neutralized the immediate threat, but the environment was far from safe. The intruder, realizing his defeat, struggled weakly to rise. She stepped forward, blocking his path, controlling the distance. Every movement, every posture reinforced her dominance. "You made a mistake," she said quietly, almost conversationally, though the authority in her tone was unmistakable. "Underestimating people is dangerous." He glared, defeated, aware that he had been completely outmatched. His training, his preparation, his plans, all rendered irrelevant by someone he considered invisible. Her eyes flicked toward the rest of the hallway. The second shadow she had sensed earlier had not reappeared, but she remained vigilant. In situations like this, caution was not paranoia, it was survival. The employees began whispering among themselves, their fear gradually replaced by awe. The woman who had swept the floors, the janitor they had ignored, had just controlled a situation that could have spiraled into disaster. And yet, she remained calm, collected, and unassuming, as if it had been just another day on the job. For a moment the hallway was silent. The only sound was her controlled breathing, the faint hum of fluorescent lights, and the subdued murmurs of stunned employees. The intruder sat on the floor, restrained, watching her with a mix of fear, disbelief, and reluctant respect. And then, without warning, a new sound pierced the silence, a faint click, almost imperceptible, coming from the far end of the hallway. A sound that suggested someone else had arrived, someone else had plans, and that the danger was not over. Her pulse quickened, not with fear but with focus. She had neutralized one threat, but the mission was far from complete. She adjusted her stance, eyes scanning every shadow, every corner, every reflective surface. The intruder's device was neutralized, but there were still unknown variables, still hidden dangers. Her training reminded her, the fight was never over until every threat was eliminated. And even then, the unseen dangers could linger, ready to strike at the first moment of weakness. She straightened, mop in hand, her calm demeanor hiding the storm of calculation in her mind. The employees, watching from a safe distance, could not comprehend the full scope of what had just occurred. But they sensed its significance. They had witnessed authority, precision, and lethal efficiency come alive in a human form they had underestimated for years. And as the faint click echoed again, she realized that the next confrontation was imminent. Someone, or something, was coming. She whispered under her breath, barely audible, "Not today, not while I'm here." The hallway held its breath once more, the tension now thicker, heavier, the stakes higher than ever. And in that pregnant silence, everyone understood, even if they didn't know why, that the janitor was no longer just a janitor. She was a force to be reckoned with. The question lingered. Who else would dare challenge her before the day was done? The janitor's eyes darted down the hallway, scanning every shadow, every corner, every flicker of movement. Her heart pounded, not with fear but with adrenaline, sharpened focus, and the unmistakable clarity that comes from years of life-or-death training. She had neutralized the first threat. the intruder with the ticking device, but something told her this was far from over. Danger had a habit of lurking where it was least expected. And then she saw it, a faint shadow slipping past the edge of the marble column near the main entrance. It was subtle, deliberate, calculated, the movements of someone trained, someone who knew how to blend, to observe, to strike at the perfect moment. Her instincts screamed a warning. The intruder she had just subdued had not been working alone. She tightened her grip on the mop, not as a cleaning tool but as an extension of her body, a weapon disguised as ordinary. Her eyes never left the shadow, even as the restrained intruder tried to rise, cursing under his breath. "You think it's over," he spat, glaring at her. She ignored him. Words had no power here. Only action, precision, and control mattered. Her training had taught her that the moment one reacts to the wrong stimuli is the moment disaster strikes. The hallway was her domain now, and every step, every decision, every breath was calculated to maintain dominance. The shadow moved again, slightly faster this time, approaching a group of employees huddled near the elevator. Panic flickered in their eyes, but their bodies still responded to her previous command, frozen yet obedient. It was time. She had to act, and she had to act decisively. With fluid precision, she stepped out from behind the marble pillar, projecting authority in every movement. Her presence alone seemed to slow the shadow, forcing it to hesitate, to reassess. She could see the subtle cues, the tightening of a fist, the shift of weight, the tilt of the head. He or she was trained but unprepared for someone who could read intent so clearly. The employees watched in awe and fear, their disbelief growing. The janitor they had overlooked, mocked, or ignored was now the center of every eye and every thought. She moved with purpose, her mop swinging lightly at her side, ready to intercept, redirect, or defend at a moment's notice. The shadow finally revealed itself, tall, lean, dressed in dark clothing that allowed it to blend into the dim corners of the hall. A glint of metal in its hand caught the fluorescent light, a small, sleek weapon. Not a gun, not obvious, but deadly if mishandled. The janitor's mind raced. This was not just an intruder. This was a professional trained for covert operations, accustomed to moving silently and striking with precision. And yet, she had the advantage: preparation, anticipation, and the element of surprise. She moved closer, using subtle body positioning to control the shadow's approach. One misstep for them, one perfect adjustment for her, and she would gain complete control. The intruder on the floor watched, eyes wide, a mixture of fear and admiration. The shadow raised the weapon slightly, testing her reaction. She didn't flinch. She didn't panic. Her training kicked in automatically, her brain processing multiple variables per second. Neutralize, disarm, protect. Every movement, every instinct had been drilled into her muscles, into her reflexes, into her mind. Then, almost imperceptibly, the shadow shifted again, this time more aggressively, moving to intercept an employee who had broken their frozen stance, perhaps attempting to flee. Time seemed to slow. She lunged forward, her mop swinging in a calculated arc, redirecting the intruder's weapon away from its intended target. Sparks flew as the metal scraped against the marble floor. The sound echoed through the hallway, a stark punctuation in the tense silence. The shadow faltered, momentarily off balance. It had underestimated her speed, her awareness, and her ability to manipulate momentum with minimal effort. She closed the distance, moving like a predator, her presence dominating the space. Employees watched, frozen yet mesmerized, as she moved with lethal grace. Every step, every adjustment, every calculated motion reinforced her authority. The janitor, who had been invisible, ignored, underestimated, was now a force no one could ignore. The shadow, sensing its miscalculation, made a desperate lunge, attempting to bypass her control. But she anticipated it, sidestepping, using leverage to redirect the attack. Her mop became a tool of control, a barrier, a weapon, and a symbol of dominance. The intruder she had restrained on the floor began to speak weakly, but she silenced him with a glance. Now was not the time for words. Action had to come first, and she would not be distracted. The secondary intruder adjusted their weapon, eyes darting to the exits, calculating escape, but she cut off every potential route with subtle, precise positioning. Her body language radiated authority, dominance, and lethal intent. The shadow hesitated, aware that they had misjudged her entirely. And then she saw it, a faint blinking light on the device the first intruder had carried. Though neutralized, a secondary trigger remained, a contingency designed to complicate any interference. Her pulse quickened, but her expression remained calm. The stakes had just escalated further. Her mind raced through possibilities. Disarm again, secure the intruder, control the secondary threat, protect the employees. Every option had consequences, every action had risk. Yet she moved with the certainty of someone who had faced impossible odds before. The shadow lunged once more aggressively this time, attempting to force her back. She pivoted, using leverage and momentum to redirect the movement, sending the shadow stumbling slightly, but not yet neutralized. The employees gasped, finally breaking some of their frozen trance. Their eyes were wide, mouths slightly open, but they still did not approach. They sensed the danger, and yet they were drawn to her authority. She stepped closer, mop in hand, calculating her next move. The intruder on the floor groaned in defeat, realizing that the secondary threat was entirely under her control, that their plans had been anticipated and countered. And then the sound came, a soft, mechanical whir, almost imperceptible, signaling that the secondary device had a delayed trigger, a backup plan. The stakes soared. One wrong move, one misjudgment, and disaster could strike instantly. She crouched slightly, assessing every angle. Her eyes flicked between the shadow, the restrained intruder, the blinking device, and the employees. Every microsecond mattered. Every breath counted. The shadow, sensing their failure, adjusted posture, preparing for another attempt. But the janitor was ready, perfectly aligned. Every muscle, every instinct, every ounce of training primed to neutralize the threat with precision. And just as the shadow lunged again, the janitor executed a swift, precise maneuver, intercepting and redirecting their momentum. Sparks flew as metal clashed with marble, and the hallway echoed with the sound of controlled chaos. The secondary intruder stumbled, eyes wide, realizing they had miscalculated entirely. The janitor's calm, unassuming appearance had masked a lethal capability they were completely unprepared for. The employees, finally moving cautiously now, whispered among themselves. The janitor had transformed from an invisible background figure into a commanding presence that none dared challenge. Her calm authority, lethal precision, and tactical brilliance had neutralized a threat they couldn't even fully comprehend. And as the shadow faltered, teetering on the edge of defeat, the janitor knew the confrontation was not yet over. Other dangers might still be lurking, unseen, waiting to strike. Her eyes narrowed, breath steady, posture composed. She whispered under her breath, almost to herself, "Finish this cleanly." The hallway remained tense, thick with anticipation, danger, and awe. The intruder, the shadow, and the employees were all caught in a web of suspense, waiting for the next move, the next signal, the next strike. And in that moment, the janitor knew that the battle was far from over. But she was more than ready. The hallway had become a pressure cooker of tension, every sound amplified, the hum of the fluorescent lights, the faint clatter of papers, the restrained groans of the first intruder, and the soft footfalls of the secondary shadow. The janitor, poised in the middle of it all, exuded a calm authority that belied the adrenaline surging through her veins. Every instinct, every muscle, every thought was tuned to one singular objective: neutralize the threat before it could harm anyone. The secondary intruder, realizing their earlier attempts had failed, shifted their stance, weapon still in hand. There was a flicker of hesitation in their movements, a hesitation born from underestimating the woman in the green uniform. They had assumed she was invisible, harmless, just another cog in the building's machinery. They were wrong, catastrophically wrong. Her eyes locked onto the shadow, reading its intent, analyzing every twitch, every subtle weight shift. She saw the signs of a trained operative, the tight shoulders, the controlled breathing, the micro-adjustments of posture meant to anticipate and react. But she had read these signs before, countless times in environments far more dangerous than this fluorescent-lit hall. "Step away from the device," she said, voice calm but commanding, cutting through the chaos like a knife. The shadow faltered. Their confidence wavered under her unshakable gaze. The employees, still frozen under her earlier command, instinctively straightened, attention fixed on her. Their eyes followed every subtle movement she made, every tilt of her head, every micro-adjustment in posture. They didn't understand why, but they felt compelled to obey. The intruder on the floor groaned, trying to rise, but she shot a glance that pinned him in place, reminding him silently that he had already lost. Her authority was absolute. The secondary intruder lunged again, this time more aggressively, attempting to bypass her control. She sidestepped smoothly, using their momentum against them. Her mop, once a simple cleaning tool, now served as a barrier, a lever, and a symbol of control. Sparks flew as metal scraped against marble, and the echo reverberated down the hall, magnifying the intensity of the moment. Every movement was calculated. Every step had purpose. Years of Navy SEAL training had honed her reflexes to anticipate, intercept, and control. The intruder was strong, skilled, but predictable to a mind that had been forged in the crucible of extreme danger. She pivoted, redirecting the shadow's momentum, sending them stumbling slightly back, but not yet fully neutralized. Their eyes widened, the first flicker of fear breaking through the mask of confidence they had worn until now. The janitor's pulse raced, not with panic but with focus. She scanned the device on the floor, the one the first intruder had carried. Though neutralized, she knew better than to assume it was completely harmless. The faint blinking light suggested a secondary trigger, a contingency plan designed to punish interference. Her hands moved deftly, fingers tracing wires and mechanisms with practiced precision. Sparks erupted as she adjusted the device, each movement deliberate, each action calculated to ensure no accidental activation. The intruder on the floor tried to intervene, but she anticipated his motion, pivoting just enough to keep him at bay. The secondary intruder, sensing the controls slipping from their hands, attempted to force her back, but she was always one step ahead. With a swift, precise maneuver, she intercepted their motion, redirecting energy and momentum effortlessly. Every movement was a demonstration of lethal grace. The employees, now slowly regaining awareness, watched in disbelief. The janitor, invisible for so long, had transformed into a figure of absolute authority, commanding the attention and obedience of everyone around her. Her presence was magnetic, terrifying, and utterly unmissable. The intruder, realizing their plans were unraveling, lashed out, a desperate attempt to regain dominance. She countered instinctively, stepping into their space, using leverage to destabilize them. Her mop was more than a tool, it was a precise instrument of control. Metal clashed against marble as the secondary intruder tried one last aggressive move. Sparks flew, ringing out through the corridor like gunfire. The first intruder groaned, still restrained, watching the scene unfold with a mixture of terror and awe. She adjusted her stance, eyes scanning the hallway, ensuring no employees were in harm's way. Every movement was deliberate, every breath measured. The secondary intruder struggled, realizing that they had completely misjudged her capabilities. Confidence had turned to fear, skill to desperation. And then came the sound, a faint whirring from the device. She froze for a heartbeat, assessing. Though neutralized, the mechanism had a delayed function, a backup designed to punish tampering. One wrong move could have catastrophic consequences. Her mind raced through options, every contingency laid out in seconds. Neutralize, secure, protect. Every step, every adjustment had to be flawless. With a sudden surge, she moved to fully secure the secondary intruder, her body positioning perfect, her actions precise. Sparks flew as she redirected the weapon, intercepted the momentum, and finally subdued the threat. The intruder collapsed, defeated. Eyes wide with disbelief, they realized their underestimation had cost them complete control. The hallway, once a scene of chaos, now lay under her silent, commanding authority. The first intruder, still restrained, groaned again, finally accepting the defeat. The employees, eyes wide, whispered among themselves, witnessing a performance of skill, authority, and control they could barely comprehend. She didn't celebrate. She didn't relax. Her eyes scanned the hallway, every corner, every shadow. There was always the possibility of another threat, another device, another contingency. Her training demanded vigilance until the situation was fully contained. She knelt slightly, adjusting the first device one last time, ensuring every wire, every mechanism was inert. Sparks had died down, the faint ticking ceased, and the danger for now was neutralized. The intruder on the floor looked up at her, a mixture of fear and grudging respect. Who are you?" they whispered, voice trembling. "Someone you underestimated," she replied quietly, almost conversationally, though her calm authority left no room for argument. The employees slowly began to move, breaking free from the residual influence of the seal code. Their disbelief lingered. The janitor, the overlooked, underestimated, invisible figure, had dominated not just one but two trained threats with precision and control. Yet she remained composed. She picked up her mop, once again a symbol of ordinary work, masking the extraordinary reality beneath. Her eyes flicked over the restrained intruders, every muscle still coiled, every sense alert. A faint noise from down the hallway drew her attention, a subtle click, almost imperceptible, but her instincts screamed that it was important. Perhaps another intruder, perhaps a backup, perhaps a final challenge waiting to reveal itself. Her pulse quickened slightly, but her expression remained calm, focused. The battle had been intense, the confrontation deadly, but the situation was not over. She whispered under her breath, almost imperceptibly, "Stay sharp. Don't let your guard down." The hallway, now quiet but charged with the memory of conflict, held its breath. Employees, wide-eyed, realized that the janitor they had ignored for years had just controlled a situation that could have ended in disaster. The first intruder, still restrained, muttered under their breath, "I've never seen anyone like you." She straightened, mop in hand, gaze scanning every shadow, every reflective surface, every potential threat. Her calm authority, lethal precision, and strategic brilliance had turned a chaotic hallway into a controlled scene of dominance. But her instincts told her the day wasn't over. Danger had a habit of hiding, and she had learned long ago that being caught off guard was fatal. Her eyes narrowed, breath steady, posture composed. The hallway remained tense, filled with anticipation and uncertainty. And in that silence, the employees understood something fundamental. This was no ordinary janitor. She was a force to be reckoned with. And the final question lingered in the air. What else had been set in motion, unseen, unknown, and waiting? The hallway was silent now, almost eerily so. The employees had stepped back, wide-eyed, whispering among themselves. Their disbelief hung in the air, thick and palpable. The two intruders were restrained, sprawled on the marble floor, yet the janitor knew better than to assume the danger was over. Something still lurked, unseen, calculated, waiting for a misstep. Her gaze flicked to the first device, neutralized but still suspicious. The faint blinking she had noticed earlier suggested a secondary trigger, a fail-safe designed to activate if tampered with. Her pulse quickened, not from fear, but from the need for precision. One wrong move now, and the consequences would be catastrophic. She crouched slightly, fingers hovering over the device, her eyes scanning every wire, every lever, every mechanism. The hum of the fluorescent lights filled the tense silence, almost as if the building itself were holding its breath. From down the hallway came a faint, rhythmic click, a noise that sounded ordinary to anyone else, but her instincts screamed it was not. Someone else had entered, someone hidden, a third player. Her eyes swept the hallway, assessing potential angles, exit routes, and shadows. The employees instinctively backed against the walls, giving her room, their movements still subdued by the lingering influence of the seal code. She had complete control of the human element, but the mechanical threat still ticked, unseen but present. She adjusted her stance, every muscle coiled and ready. The intruders on the floor watched her with fear and reluctant awe. Their carefully laid plans had unraveled, undone by someone they thought invisible, ordinary, insignificant. The faint clicking grew louder, faster. It was a countdown of sorts, subtle, mechanical, almost imperceptible, but enough to send her mind racing. Seconds mattered, precision mattered, timing was everything. Her fingers danced over the device with practiced precision, tracing circuits, redirecting wires, adjusting levers. Sparks flew occasionally, the sound echoing off the marble walls, a sharp punctuation to the tense atmosphere. Each movement had to be flawless. Each second carried weight. The intruder who had lunged first groaned, weakly attempting to rise, but she shot a glance that pinned him back into place. Words were useless here. Only action mattered. Then came the shadow, a movement at the far end of the hallway. She had sensed it before her eyes confirmed it. Another intruder, another threat, possibly an accomplice to the first two, creeping closer with measured, precise steps. Her body tensed, mind calculating. If this new threat reached the device or the restrained intruders, the consequences could be deadly. She adjusted her stance, ready to intercept, control, and neutralize. The employees remained frozen, aware of danger but unable to process fully what they were witnessing. Their eyes followed her, their bodies responding instinctively to her authority. She lunged forward, not recklessly, but with the precision of a predator. Her mop swung lightly, intercepting the path of the advancing shadow. Sparks erupted as metal met marble, and the echo reverberated down the corridor, amplifying the tension. The shadow stumbled slightly, caught off guard by her speed and anticipation. It wasn't the first time someone underestimated her, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. Every training session, every mission, every life-or-death moment had prepared her for this exact scenario. An unseen threat, moving quickly, calculating, ready to strike. She pivoted, redirecting the shadow's momentum, forcing them toward the side, away from the device and the restrained intruders. Every movement was precise, calculated, efficient. She was a whirlwind of lethal grace, invisible to some but utterly dominant in the room. The faint ticking of the device grew louder, each tick a stark reminder of the stakes. Seconds were slipping away. She needed to neutralize the secondary trigger before it was too late. Her hands moved with flawless efficiency, tracing circuits, redirecting current, stabilizing mechanisms. Sparks flew, and the faint hum of electrical tension filled the hallway. The device had resisted neutralization once, but she wouldn't fail. She couldn't fail. The secondary intruder, now fully aware of their precarious situation, attempted to lunge again, desperate to regain control. She anticipated, intercepted, and redirected, her movements fluid and precise. One motion, one misstep, and the device could activate. The employees gasped, witnessing a ballet of danger and control, each movement choreographed by someone they had always ignored. Their janitor had become a force of calculated precision, capable of controlling chaos without a single word of explanation. Her pulse raced, but her expression remained calm. Every training drill, every mission memory surged to the forefront of her mind. Years of life-or-death decisions crystallized into split-second calculations. She adjusted the device, one final maneuver, twisting, redirecting, ensuring that the faint blinking light finally ceased. The ticking stopped. Silence fell like a heavy blanket over the hallway. She didn't relax, not yet. She scanned every shadow, every potential hiding spot, every reflective surface. Danger could still be waiting, unseen but present. The restrained intruders lay on the floor, defeated, their plans unraveled, their confidence shattered. The employees slowly began to regain awareness, their fear slowly mixing with awe. They could see, finally, that the janitor they had overlooked was someone extraordinary. Then came the sound, almost imperceptible at first, a click from the far end of the hallway. She froze, muscles coiled, eyes scanning. Another device, another intruder. The threat was not over. Her pulse surged, not from fear but from focus. This was the moment that demanded absolute precision. Every instinct, every skill, every ounce of training would be tested. The shadow moved again, slightly faster, attempting to exploit a gap, but she anticipated, intercepted, and redirected effortlessly. Sparks flew as metal clashed against marble. Every movement reinforced her dominance. The intruders on the floor looked on, disbelief and fear etched into their faces. They had never encountered someone like her, someone who could anticipate, control, and neutralize with such lethal efficiency. The employees whispered among themselves, awestruck, witnessing the janitor transform into an agent of control, a figure of lethal authority, someone they had ignored for years. And then a faint glow appeared at the far end of the hall, a subtle light reflecting off metal. Another device, a weapon. She didn't know yet, but her instincts screamed that the next few seconds would determine whether the hallway remained secure or descended into chaos. She adjusted her stance, every muscle ready, eyes sharp. The faint ticking had stopped, but danger lingered, unseen but present. She whispered under her breath, almost imperceptibly, "Stay ready, don't let up." The hallway seemed to shrink, every shadow, every reflective surface, every sound amplified in her awareness. Seconds were precious. Precision was everything. The first intruder groaned weakly from the floor, realizing their failure, while the secondary shadow hesitated, caught in her web of anticipation and control. The employees remained still, mesmerized, aware that they were witnessing someone extraordinary in action. And in that tense, charged silence, the janitor knew the final confrontation was imminent. Something else, unseen and calculated, waited just beyond her vision, ready to test her limits. Her pulse surged, not with panic but with controlled focus. She tightened her grip on the mop, her body poised to move, to control, to neutralize. Every instinct screamed, the fight is not over. The hallway held its breath, waiting. The employees, the intruders, even the unseen threat beyond the shadows. Everyone was suspended in a moment of taut anticipation. And the janitor, calm, composed, lethal, whispered under her breath, almost to herself, "Let's finish this." Hallway had transformed into a tense battlefield. The fluorescent lights flickered intermittently, casting long, distorted shadows along the polished marble floors. The employees, frozen in awe and fear, pressed against the walls, their wide eyes fixed on the janitor, once invisible, now undeniably commanding. The two intruders were incapacitated on the floor, groaning in disbelief, but the danger wasn't over. Somewhere in the building lurked a final threat, calculated, silent, and deadly. She tightened her grip on the mop. Her body was a coil of precision and lethal readiness, each movement fluid, deliberate, calculated. Her eyes scanned every corner, every reflective surface, every potential hiding place. The faint mechanical hum she had sensed earlier had stopped, or perhaps it was merely the calm before a final storm. Then, almost imperceptibly, a faint shift of air caught her attention. She turned slightly, tilting her head, muscles coiled, eyes narrowing. There it was, a shadow detached from the hall's geometric lines, moving with careful stealth. The last intruder, unseen until now, had decided to make their move. Her pulse surged not from fear but from focus. Years of Navy SEAL training surged through her veins, sharpening instincts, heightening awareness. Every micro-movement of the shadow told a story. Trained operative, skilled, cautious, but impatient. One miscalculation, one delayed reaction, and disaster could strike. The shadow moved closer, weapon glinting in the faint light, a sleek, compact device capable of chaos. She anticipated every step, every pivot, every feint, calculating angles, momentum, and leverage. Her mop was more than a cleaning tool. It was a symbol, a weapon, a barrier, a controller of space and flow. Her voice was calm, cutting through the tension like steel. "Step away, now." No response. The shadow hesitated but did not retreat. Its confidence had been shaken but not entirely broken. This final threat had underestimated the janitor, as so many had before, but now they faced someone who could read intent like an open book, someone whose authority radiated in every subtle movement. She shifted her weight, body coiled, eyes locked, ready to strike, redirect, and control. The employees watched, mesmerized, unable to look away. What had been mundane, ordinary, and invisible had become extraordinary, lethal, and mesmerizing. The shadow lunged, the weapon aimed with calculated precision. She reacted instantly, intercepting the motion, redirecting momentum. Sparks flew as metal clashed with marble. The sound echoed down the corridor, punctuating the tension. She pivoted, spinning slightly to redirect the threat away from herself and the restrained intruders. Every movement was a combination of instinct, training, and intuition. She had faced ambushes, hostile territory, and life-or-death scenarios in the past, but this confined hallway required the same precision in a different form. The intruders on the floor watched in disbelief, realizing they were completely outmatched. Their plans, their preparation, their confidence, all undone by someone they had considered invisible. The employees, caught between fear and awe, whispered among themselves, barely daring to breathe. The shadow adjusted, attempting a new angle, a desperate move to regain control. She anticipated it before it fully materialized, stepping into the trajectory, using leverage to unbalance the intruder while keeping the mop as both shield and extension of her body. Sparks erupted as metal met marble, the hallway echoing with the intensity of the confrontation. Her pulse remained steady, every breath controlled. Her mind raced through contingencies, calculating angles, timing, and leverage. One wrong move could trigger a concealed device or escalate the threat. She had neutralized multiple dangers already, but this final intruder was the unknown variable, the wild card that demanded absolute focus. She moved again, a sudden surge forward, intercepting a weapon aimed at the device. Sparks flew as contact rang out, and the intruder stumbled, momentarily disoriented. The janitor pressed the advantage, positioning herself perfectly to control the flow of the confrontation. The employees were captivated, mesmerized. The janitor they had ignored, overlooked, and underestimated had become an agent of controlled chaos, a force no one dared challenge. Her calm authority radiated outward, influencing the room, controlling both human and mechanical elements with precision. The shadow tried another desperate maneuver, lunging to reach the device or escape. She anticipated, intercepted, and redirected, each movement flawless, precise, and deliberate. The intruders on the floor groaned, helpless, understanding that their fate was sealed. Then came the faint ticking, almost imperceptible but unmistakable. A secondary mechanism had activated. Seconds counted. Time was a blade slicing through the tension, demanding action. Her mind surged with clarity. She crouched slightly, fingers tracing circuits, adjusting levers, redirecting energy. Sparks flew as she stabilized the device, neutralizing the final threat. The ticking ceased. Silence fell, thick, heavy, and complete. The shadow staggered back, weapon finally neutralized, realization dawning. They had underestimated the janitor, misjudged her capabilities, and now faced defeat at the hands of someone they had deemed insignificant. She straightened, mop in hand, every muscle relaxed yet poised, every sense alert. The employees slowly exhaled, whispering among themselves, their fear now mingled with awe and disbelief. They had witnessed the impossible, a janitor, invisible for years, controlling a hallway full of threats with lethal precision and calm authority. The intruders on the floor finally accepted their defeat, groaning, eyes wide with disbelief. They had underestimated her entirely, and the consequences were undeniable. Her gaze swept the hallway, every corner, every shadow, every reflective surface. She had neutralized every immediate threat, yet instinct told her the danger could linger elsewhere. Vigilance was key. Complacency could be fatal. The employees began to move cautiously now, finally breaking free from the lingering influence of the SEAL command. Their whispers filled the hallway, a mixture of fear, awe, and admiration. They had seen a transformation. The janitor was no longer just a janitor. She was a force of precision, control, and authority that none could challenge. Her eyes returned to the restrained intruders. She knelt slightly, adjusting their positions, ensuring they were secure and unable to react further. Sparks from the earlier device had died down. The hallway returned to a deceptive calm, but her awareness remained sharp, alert to any subtle cues of hidden danger. And then she did something unexpected. She straightened, mop in hand, and addressed the employees, her voice calm yet commanding. "Stay calm, stay observant, and don't forget what you just witnessed." The room held its breath. The intruders looked up, defeated, while the employees absorbed the weight of her words. The janitor, once invisible, had not just controlled chaos, she had dominated it, neutralized it, and taught everyone present a lesson in vigilance, authority, and capability. But even as the tension ebbed slightly, her instincts screamed that this was not the end. Danger had a habit of hiding, waiting for a lapse, a mistake, or a moment of complacency. Her eyes scanned the hallway one last time, every muscle coiled, every sense alert, ready for any unseen challenge that might emerge. The hallway remained tense, the memory of the confrontation lingering in the air. The intruders lay subdued, the employees wide-eyed, and she stood in the center, mop in hand, calm, poised, lethal, and in complete control. And in that charged silence, the janitor realized something profound. Invisibility could be a weapon, underestimation could be a shield, and ordinary appearances could conceal extraordinary power. Her pulse slowed slightly, but her focus remained unbroken. The hallway was safe, for now, but the world was unpredictable, full of shadows and threats lurking just out of sight. She had neutralized the immediate dangers, yet the fight for control, for vigilance, would never truly end. She whispered under her breath, almost imperceptibly, "Always ready, always aware." The hallway held its breath, suspended between awe and uncertainty, as the employees slowly absorbed what they had witnessed. The janitor was no longer invisible. She was unforgettable. And beyond the hall, somewhere unseen, the final question lingered. Would anyone ever challenge her again? And if they did, would they survive? The hallway was finally still. The two intruders lay restrained, their plans shattered, their confidence utterly destroyed. The faint hum of fluorescent lights seemed almost peaceful compared to the chaos that had erupted moments before. The employees, still pressed against the walls, exchanged wide-eyed glances, unsure whether to speak, move, or simply breathe. The janitor, once invisible, overlooked, underestimated, stood at the center, mop in hand, calm, poised, and in complete command of the scene. She allowed herself a slow exhale, the first hint of release since the ordeal began. Her senses remained alert. Years of training had conditioned her to never fully relax until the threat was gone. Yet she could feel it. The immediate danger had passed. The devices had been neutralized, the intruders subdued, and the employees unharmed. Their eyes were on her, on the woman who had transformed an ordinary hallway into a battlefield and emerged in absolute control. Some looked astonished, some fearful, some inspired, but all understood one thing clearly. This was no ordinary janitor. One of the employees, a young man who had been trembling in the corner, finally found his voice. I don't understand. Who are you?" She allowed herself a faint smile, calm but authoritative. "Someone you've overlooked for far too long," she said simply, letting her presence speak louder than words ever could. The employees whispered among themselves, recounting what they had seen. The janitor had moved with the precision of a battlefield operative, neutralizing threats before they could even realize they were vulnerable. The seal code she had uttered earlier had frozen them not just physically, but mentally, forcing their subconscious to obey her commands. They had unknowingly been part of her strategy all along. The restrained intruders groaned and muttered curses, realizing they had been completely outmatched by someone they assumed was insignificant. Their training, their preparation, their confidence, all meaningless against someone with her level of skill, anticipation, and authority. She crouched slightly, scanning the devices one last time. Every wire, every circuit, every blinking light had been secured. Sparks had ceased, timers had stopped, and the immediate threat had been neutralized. Yet she remained vigilant. Danger often lingered in shadows, and her instincts told her that complete relaxation was a mistake. The employees began to move cautiously, breaking free from the residual influence of the seal code. Their postures straightened, eyes still wide with awe, but a newfound respect had taken hold. They could no longer see her as just a janitor. She had revealed the extraordinary beneath the ordinary, the power beneath the invisibility, the skill beneath the mop and uniform. The first intruder, still restrained, groaned weakly, glancing up at her with a mixture of fear and grudging respect. I've never seen anyone like you," he admitted, voice trembling. She tilted her head slightly, gaze steady, unwavering. "Then remember this," she said softly but firmly. "Underestimating people can be dangerous." Her words hung in the air, a quiet lesson with lethal authority. The employees absorbed it instinctively, realizing that appearances could be deceiving, that ordinary exteriors could conceal extraordinary capability. Security arrived moments later, alerted by the commotion, and found the hallway cleared of active threats. The restrained intruders were quickly escorted away, mumbling apologies, disbelief, and curses under their breath. The employees recounted the events, emphasizing the janitor's decisive actions, precision, and unshakable composure. Yet despite the admiration and awe, she did not linger for praise. She returned to her mop and bucket, moving with calm efficiency, as if the chaos had been nothing more than another day's work. Her presence commanded authority without seeking recognition, a silent assertion that competence did not require validation. The employees continued to whisper, recounting every detail. "Did you see how she moved?" one asked. "It was like watching someone in the middle of a mission, every move calculated, precise." Another nodded, eyes still wide. "And the devices, she disarmed them like it was nothing. She knew exactly what to do." Some approached cautiously, gratitude evident on their faces. Others remained in awe, unable to reconcile the image of the ordinary janitor with the extraordinary force they had just witnessed. The seal code she had used had left an imprint of respect and obedience, even as they tried to process the reality of what had happened. She paused for a moment, looking around the hallway. Her eyes, trained for danger, scanned every corner, every shadow, every potential threat. Nothing moved, nothing shifted. The hallway was finally secure. Yet she remained poised, vigilant, aware that true safety was never guaranteed. A young employee stepped forward timidly, holding a clipboard that had fallen during the confrontation. Thank you," he stammered. We don't know how to." She gave a faint nod, accepting the gratitude without fanfare. "Stay alert," she said simply, "and remember, appearances can deceive." The employees absorbed the words, some silently, some nodding, all understanding the lesson in a way they never would have before. She had revealed the extraordinary beneath the ordinary, and in doing so, had changed their perception forever. As she moved toward the mop and bucket, she glanced at the restrained intruders one final time. "Learn this well," she said quietly, eyes sharp, voice calm but unwavering. "Underestimate no one." Then she turned and continued her work, every movement deliberate, calm, and composed. The hallway returned to its ordinary rhythm, but the impact of her actions lingered in every corner, every mind, every eye. Outside the building, the world carried on, oblivious to the extraordinary events that had just unfolded within. But within those walls, the lesson was indelible. The janitor, invisible for so long, had revealed herself as a force of precision, authority, and lethal skill. She had controlled chaos, neutralized threats, and commanded respect without seeking recognition. The employees would speak of this day for years, recounting the ordinary janitor who had become a figure of awe, a symbol of vigilance, a living lesson in underestimation and authority. Her actions would ripple through their memories, a quiet testament to the extraordinary hidden in plain sight. And she returned to her work with the same calm efficiency, eyes ever alert, senses sharp, ready for whatever else the world might throw into her path. The hallway was safe, for now, but she knew that vigilance was eternal, that preparation and skill were the true measures of survival. Her voice, calm and resolute, echoed in the minds of those who had witnessed her, always ready, always aware, never underestimated. The hallway was still, the employees humbled, the intruders defeated, and the janitor, once invisible, always underestimated, remained in command. She had revealed the extraordinary beneath the ordinary, and the lesson would never be forgotten. As the sun began to set outside, casting long shadows through the windows, she continued her work, mop in hand, every movement a quiet assertion of competence, authority, and preparedness. The chaos had been contained, the threats neutralized, the lesson delivered. And though the building had returned to normalcy on the surface, everyone present knew the truth. The janitor was no longer invisible. She was unforgettable.